She was born into a small home where love once lived, but it did not last long. Her real mother passed away when she was still very young. She was too small to understand death, but she felt the emptiness it left behind. The house became quiet. The warmth disappeared. Her father tried his best to care for her, but grief made him distant. He worked long hours, hoping time would heal both of them. After a few years, her father remarried. He believed a new wife would bring balance back into their lives. At first, the woman seemed kind. She spoke softly and smiled in front of others. But behind closed doors, her eyes were cold. She never looked at the child with warmth. To her, the girl was a reminder of another woman, a past she did not want to accept. In the beginning, the cruelty was small. It was easy to miss. The girl would be the last to eat. Sometimes she was not allowed to sit at the table. Her clothes were old, while new ones were bought for others. When she asked questions, she was told to stay quiet. When she made mistakes, she was scolded harshly. Slowly, she learned that silence was safer than speaking. Her father noticed some changes, but he was tired and distracted. Whenever the girl tried to speak, the stepmother would interrupt, saying the child was lying or seeking attention. She would act caring in front of him, praising herself as a patient guardian. Over time, he stopped questioning it. He wanted peace in his home, and believing his wife was easier than facing the truth. The girl grew up feeling unwanted. School was her only escape. She loved sitting quietly, listening to teachers, and reading borrowed books. Knowledge became her comfort. But even there, she felt different. She wore worn shoes and faded clothes. Other children sometimes whispered, sometimes laughed. She never fought back. She believed she deserved it. At home, the stepmother's hatred slowly grew stronger. Any small mistake became a reason for punishment. If something broke, the girl was blamed. If food was missing, the girl was accused. The woman spoke to her with sharp words that cut deeper than any wound. She reminded the child daily that she was a burden. The father traveled often for work. Each time he left, the house turned darker. The stepmother would give the girl extra chores, forcing her to clean until her hands hurt. She was not allowed to rest. If she became tired, she was called lazy. If she cried, she was called weak. There was no comfort, no safe corner to hide in. As the years passed, the girl became quieter. She learned how to move without being noticed. She learned how to swallow her pain. Her body was thin, her face pale, but her eyes still carried a soft kindness. She never became bitter. She still helped others when she could, even though no one helped her. One winter, her health began to change. It started with small fevers and weakness. She felt dizzy while standing and tired even after sleeping. At school, she struggled to focus. Teachers noticed her fading energy and suggested medical care. When this was mentioned at home, the stepmother reacted with anger instead of concern. She complained about expenses. She accused the girl of pretending to be sick to avoid work. She said illness was a sign of laziness. The girl tried to explain how she felt, but her words were ignored. The stepmother believed sickness brought shame. She did not want neighbors asking questions. As the illness worsened, the girl's body became weaker. She struggled to carry water, struggled to breathe on cold nights. Still, she was forced to work. The stepmother showed no mercy. Instead, her hatred deepened. She began speaking about the girl as if she were already gone. The father returned home one evening and noticed the girl's condition. He saw her trembling hands and tired eyes. For a moment, concern appeared on his face. But before he could act, the stepmother spoke. She told him the girl was pretending. She cried and claimed she was being accused unfairly. Her performance convinced him again. That night, the girl lay awake, listening to the wind outside. She wondered why love felt so far away. She wondered if life would always feel heavy. She did not dream of wealth or comfort. She only wished to be treated like a human being. Days passed, and her sickness became harder to hide. Neighbors noticed her slow steps. Some whispered, others felt pity. The stepmother grew fearful of gossip. She did not want blame. Her thoughts turned dark. She believed the girl's presence was ruining her life. The girl sensed the change. She felt the coldness grow stronger. Every word spoken to her felt sharper. Every look felt like rejection. Yet she remained calm. She did not know what awaited her, but she felt something terrible was coming. One evening, while washing dishes, she collapsed to the floor. Her body gave up. The stepmother looked at her without panic. Instead, she felt anger. She saw the girl not as a child in pain, but as a problem that needed to be removed. That moment marked the beginning of a decision that would change everything. The girl's illness had turned the stepmother's quiet hatred into something dangerous. What started as neglect was now turning into abandonment. And the child, still holding on to hope, had no idea that her life was about to be pushed into darkness beyond anything she had known. This was only the beginning of her story. The beginning of how love was denied, how cruelty grew, and how a young life was slowly pushed toward a place no child should ever be forced to face. After the night she collapsed on the cold floor, her body was weak, but her mind was awake. She understood that something inside the house had shifted. The stepmother no longer hid her dislike. Her words became sharper, her patience thinner. Every cough from the girl sounded like an insult to her ears. The next morning, the girl woke up late. Her head felt heavy, and her chest hurt when she breathed. She tried to stand, but her legs shook. When she finally reached the kitchen, the stepmother was already angry. She complained about wasted time and unfinished work. There was no question about her health, no care, only blame. The girl tried to explain that she felt unwell, but the stepmother cut her off. She said sickness was just an excuse. She reminded her that poor people do not have the luxury of being ill. The girl lowered her eyes and went back to work. She cleaned, cooked, and washed until her strength faded again. Days passed like this. Each day felt longer than the last. The illness did not leave her body. Instead, it slowly spread. She lost her appetite. Her sleep became restless. At night, she would lie awake, listening to the stepmother's footsteps, afraid of being called again. Her father noticed that the house felt tense when he returned. The girl looked thinner, quieter, but every time he asked, the stepmother answered before the girl could speak. She said the child had become lazy. She said she was pretending to gain sympathy. The father wanted to believe her. He did not want more problems. The girl stopped trying to explain. She learned that words only made things worse. Silence became her shield. She focused on surviving each day. When she felt pain, she hid it. When she felt dizzy, she leaned against the wall until it passed. She told herself that things would improve, but instead of improving, life grew colder. The stepmother began limiting her food. She said the girl did not deserve full meals if she could not work properly. Some nights the girl slept hungry. Her stomach ached, but she did not complain. Hunger felt easier to handle than anger. At school, her teachers grew concerned. She often rested her head on the desk. Her writing became weak. When asked questions, she answered softly, afraid to draw attention. One teacher suggested again that she'd see a doctor. The girl nodded, knowing it would never happen. Whispers followed her in school corridors. Some classmates thought she was cursed. Others felt sorry for her but were too afraid to help. She walked alone, carrying books that felt heavier each day. Still, she loved learning. Even when her body failed her, her mind searched for meaning. At home, the stepmother's fear grew. Neighbors had begun to notice the girl's condition. They asked questions. The stepmother smiled and said the girl was dramatic. But inside, she worried about blame. She worried about being judged. One evening, after a neighbor showed concern, the stepmother exploded. She accused the girl of trying to ruin her reputation. Her voice was loud, filled with rage. She said the girl was ungrateful and useless. The girl stood quietly, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. That night, the girl cried silently into her pillow. She did not cry because of pain alone. She cried because she felt unwanted in the world. She wondered why she was born into a place where love felt like a crime. Yet even in her sadness, she did not wish harm on anyone. Her sickness reached a point where she could barely stand. Simple tasks felt impossible. One morning, she fainted again while carrying water. This time, the stepmother did not rush to help. She stared for a moment, then turned away. She said the girl was doing this on purpose. The father was away again. The house belonged to the stepmother. She made a decision in her heart, though she did not speak it yet. The girl's presence felt like a threat. Every cough, every weakness, reminded her of trouble. Instead of helping, she began planning. She spoke about sending the girl somewhere cheaper, somewhere people would not ask questions. She said the city was too expensive. She said poor areas were better for sick people. Her words sounded reasonable on the surface, but her intentions were dark. The girl overheard parts of these conversations. She did not understand fully, but she felt fear growing inside her. She sensed she was no longer safe. Still, she hoped her father would protect her. She held on to that hope tightly. When the father returned, the stepmother acted gentle again. She spoke softly, pretending to worry. She said the girl needed a different environment. She said they could not afford doctors. She cried and said she was exhausted. The father felt trapped. He loved his child, but he felt helpless. Money was tight. Work was uncertain. He trusted his wife's judgment, believing she knew what was best. He did not see the danger hiding behind her tears. The girl listened from another room. Her heart sank. She realized no one was truly listening to her. Her future was being decided without her voice. She wanted to speak, but fear held her back. That night, she packed a small bag without being asked. She folded her old clothes carefully. She placed her books inside, along with a small photo from her childhood. She did not know where she was going. She felt she was about to lose everything familiar. Her body was weak, but her mind was clear. She understood that sickness had changed how she was seen. Instead of compassion, it had brought hatred. Instead of care, it had brought rejection. The next morning, the stepmother told her to be ready. Her voice was calm, almost relieved. The girl nodded quietly. She did not argue. She did not cry. Something inside her had gone silent. As she stepped outside the house, she looked back one last time. It had never truly felt like home, but it was all she knew. She wondered if she would ever return. She did not know that this was the start of her life in a place far harsher than she imagined. A place where survival would depend not on family, but on strangers. And while her illness had weakened her body, it was about to test her spirit in ways she could never have prepared for. This was the moment when neglect turned into abandonment, and the girl, still hoping for kindness, was being pushed toward a future filled with uncertainty and pain. The girl walked slowly along the dusty path, her small bag swinging at her side. Her body ached with weakness, and every step felt heavier than the last. The houses of her old neighborhood disappeared behind her. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Her heart felt tight, like a bird trapped in a cage. She had been pushed out of the home that was supposed to protect her, left to face a world that seemed cold and unforgiving. She arrived at the slum area as the sun began to rise. Small, crowded homes, made of tin and wood, lined the narrow streets. Children played barefoot on the dirt, shouting and laughing, but the sound did not reach her ears. She felt invisible, as though the world had forgotten her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and her cough worsened with the dusty air. She tried to hide it, but some people looked at her with pity. Others looked away, busy with their own lives. The first few days were the hardest. She did not know anyone here, and there was no one to guide her. She tried asking for water or a place to rest, but most people ignored her or shook their heads. She found a small corner behind a broken fence and curled up, shivering in the cold. Nights were especially frightening. She listened to strange sounds and worried that someone might harm her. She missed a place where she felt safe, even if it had been cruel to her. Food was her biggest struggle. She had no money and no one to give her food. She searched through small markets and begged for leftovers, but there was barely enough to survive. She often went hungry, her body weakening further. Her sickness made every meal, or lack of it, even harder to bear. At times she thought she would collapse from exhaustion, but something inside her told her to keep going. She had survived this long, and she would not give up. The people of the slum were rough, shaped by their own struggles. Some were kind, offering her small portions of bread or a cup of water. These small gestures became her lifeline. She learned to watch, to observe, to find those who might help. A woman who sold vegetables gave her scraps. An old man shared advice on finding clean water. She felt tiny sparks of hope, but they were fragile. Trust was difficult after everything she had endured. She also met other children her age. Some had lost their parents, others had been abandoned. At first they ignored her, suspicious of her pale skin and quiet manner. But slowly, they included her in their games. They shared what little food they had. Even in poverty, they had bonds that made life bearable. For the first time since leaving home, she felt a sense of belonging. However, small days turned into weeks, and her body grew weaker. Her cough became persistent, and her eyes sunken. She knew she needed care, but there were no doctors nearby who would treat someone without money. Sometimes she lay down watching the clouds, wondering if her father knew where she was. She wanted to reach out to tell him she was alive, but she did not know how. Letters cost money, and she had none. The slum was dangerous too. Theft and fights were common. She learned quickly to stay out of trouble, to avoid people who could hurt her. Her small bag became precious. Inside were her few belongings and memories of the life she had lost. Each day was a test of survival. She was sick, hungry, and alone, but she was determined to live. Despite the hardship, she discovered inner strength she never knew existed. She learned to fetch water from distant taps, to cook small meals over makeshift fires, and to rest when she could. Her illness slowed her down, but it did not destroy her spirit. She realized that survival meant more than physical endurance, it meant staying kind and gentle even. When the world was harsh one evening, after a long day of searching for food, she stumbled upon a small clinic at the edge of the slum. It was run by a kind woman who treated poor children for free. The girl hesitated at first, afraid she might be turned away. But the woman welcomed her warmly, examining her carefully. She gave her medicine and a simple diet plan. It was not a cure, but it was hope. For the first time in weeks, the girl slept through the night without shivering. Her body was still weak, but her mind felt lighter. She thought about the stepmother and the home she had lost. She felt sadness, but also a quiet strength. She had survived cruelty, neglect, and sickness. Now, she was learning how to survive kindness and trust. As weeks passed, her health improved slightly. She still coughed and still went hungry sometimes, but she was stronger. The children of the slum became her companions. The woman at the clinic became her mentor, teaching her how to care for herself and others. The girl began to dream again, not of wealth or comfort, but of safety, dignity, and respect. However, life in the slums was not free of danger. One day a fight broke out nearby, and she was caught in the chaos. People shouted, and debris flew through the air. She hid behind a small wall, her heart pounding. The children she had grown close to held her hand, keeping her calm. She realized that even here, danger was always near. But courage could come from friendship. Through all the trials, she never gave up hope that one day her life would change. She had no idea how or when, but she believed that goodness existed somewhere. She learned to appreciate small gestures of kindness. Understanding that life could be beautiful even in hardship, months passed and the girl began to adapt. She knew the streets, the people, and the rhythm of life in the slums. She found ways to earn small amounts of money, helping neighbors with chores or selling small items. Each coin felt like a victory, each meal a blessing. Slowly, she built a fragile stability for herself, but she never forgot the home she had been forced to leave. Memories of the stepmother's cruelty and her father's absence lingered. She felt sadness for the lost childhood she should have had. Yet she carried a quiet pride. She had survived everything thrown at her and learned to navigate a harsh world with resilience. She also learned that even in a place full of struggle, people could show love. Friends shared food, gave advice, and watched over each other. She began to understand that family was not always about blood. Sometimes it was about who stayed by your side when the world turned against you. Her sickness was still a shadow over her life, but it was no longer the center. Survival, friendship, and small acts of kindness became her focus. She learned to laugh again, to feel joy in small things a sunny morning, a kind smile, or a shared meal. Life in the slums was not easy, but it was teaching her lessons she could never learn in a protected home. She learned to fight without violence, to hope without certainty, and to trust without giving up her heart completely. She understood that while she could not control what others did to her, she could control how she responded. And so, the girl's life in the slums continued. Each day was a struggle, but each day also brought small victories. She was no longer a child completely alone. She had found a fragile community, a bit of safety, and a glimmer of hope. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she had discovered her own strength. She had learned that even in the darkest places, a spark of light could survive. If only one refused to give up, life in the slums had become her daily reality. The girl woke up early each morning, her body still fragile, her cough persistent, but her spirit more resilient than ever. She had learned to navigate the narrow paths and crowded spaces, to find places with clean water, and to make friends who shared their tiny joys with her. Each day was a struggle, but it was also a lesson. She began to see that even in hardship, kindness could survive, and she held on to that thought like a lifeline. One afternoon, while helping a neighbor carry firewood, she noticed a small gathering near the market. A child had fallen into a shallow pit and was crying. Without thinking, she rushed over and helped pull him out. The mother of the child thanked her profusely and insisted she come with her to her home. The girl hesitated, but the woman's warmth and genuine concern made her trust for the first time in a long while. She stepped inside and saw a small but clean room. For a moment, she felt what it was like to be cared for, to have someone notice her and her struggles. Days turned into weeks, and she found herself visiting this small household often. The woman taught her small things like preparing food carefully, cleaning thoroughly, and managing her tiny resources. She even gave her books to read, something the girl had not seen in months. Each page she read reminded her of her old school, the joy of learning, and the dreams she had buried deep inside herself. She realized that knowledge and kindness could be a refuge even in a world that seemed harsh and unfair. One day, a volunteer doctor came to the slum, offering basic health checkups. The girl, remembering the clinic she had visited before, decided to go. The doctor examined her carefully, listened to her symptoms, and offered some medicine. The relief she felt was immense. For the first time in weeks, she felt her body respond positively. Her energy returned slowly, and she felt a renewed sense of hope. She began to believe that her illness would not define her future. The girl also started helping other children in the slum. She taught them simple hygiene practices and shared what little knowledge she had. She showed them that even in the hardest circumstances, one could make life a little better for others. This gave her purpose and shifted her focus from only surviving to also helping. She realized that her strength could serve a greater purpose, and that gave her a sense of control she had never known. Her small acts of kindness did not go unnoticed. Neighbors began to respect her quietly, and some even offered small help in return. A woman gave her leftover food, a man shared tools to repair a tiny shelter, and the children became her companions. She realized that while her stepmother had abandoned her, life had not entirely turned against her. She could find people who would stand beside her if she gave them a chance. The girl also began to dream again. She imagined a life where she could go to school regularly, where she would not be abandoned when sick, and where she could learn without fear. She thought about her father and wondered if he knew the truth. She did not know how to reach him, but hope became a quiet companion, whispering that life might still hold good things for her. One evening, while walking home from the market, she encountered an elderly woman who lived alone in a tiny house. The woman looked frail, but her eyes were sharp and kind. She invited the girl in, noticing her thin frame and tired expression. The girl hesitated, unsure if she could trust someone new, but the warmth in the woman's home felt safe. They talked for hours, and the woman shared stories of resilience and survival. She spoke about life's challenges, but also about the hidden goodness in people who sometimes appeared invisible. The girl felt a spark of encouragement she had not felt in years. The elderly woman became a mentor figure. She taught the girl how to earn a small income through crafts and handiwork. She explained the importance of saving even a little money and investing time in learning skills that could help in the future. The girl listened intently, absorbing every lesson. She realized that even in a place where life was hard, there were opportunities to grow, to learn, and to plan for a better future. Weeks later, the girl became more confident. She no longer saw herself as just a weak, sick child. She was a survivor. She had faced neglect, cruelty, abandonment, and illness, yet she stood stronger. She had friends who cared for her, mentors who guided her, and a purpose that went beyond mere survival. Each day, she grew a little more independent, a little more hopeful, and a little more capable of shaping her own destiny. Yet, she never forgot the stepmother who had abandoned her. The memory of being cast out in sickness, left to fend for herself, was still painful. It was a reminder of the cruelty some people could harbor. But she did not dwell on anger. Instead, she used it as motivation, a reminder to build a life of compassion and strength rather than bitterness. Her health continued to improve slowly. She could walk longer distances, work more efficiently, and even smile without pain. The friends she made in the slum became like a new family. They shared joys, sorrows, and small victories. She learned to laugh again, to enjoy simple pleasures like the warmth of the sun, the taste of a sweet treat, or the sound of laughter among friends. As she grew stronger, she began to dream of education once more. She wanted to return to school, to gain knowledge that could help her rise above her circumstances. The elderly mentor woman encouraged this and helped her find a local volunteer teacher who could guide her in basic studies. For the first time in a long while, the girl felt a sense of direction and hope for the future. The girl's life in the slums was far from easy. Hunger, illness, and danger were still present. But she had learned resilience, kindness, and hope. She understood that life would not always be fair, but she could create pockets of goodness for herself and others. Each day, she carried herself with quiet dignity, refusing to let the harshness of her past define her future. One day, she was helping at the clinic. A small act of kindness changed her life further. A wealthy woman came to the slum to donate supplies. She noticed the girl's dedication and care for others. She asked questions, listened to her story, and offered assistance. The girl was cautious but grateful. This encounter opened a door she had never expected. A door that might lead to safety, stability, and a chance to rebuild her life from the ground up. Through all these experiences, the girl learned an invaluable lesson. While cruelty and hardship could appear overwhelming, kindness and perseverance could change the course of one's life. She had endured abandonment, sickness, and poverty, yet she had found moments of hope, trust, and love. These moments became her anchor, reminding her that she was not powerless. She could still shape her destiny. Life in the slums had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. But with each challenge, she grew stronger, wiser, and more determined. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had the courage to face whatever came next. Her past could not be erased, but it could become the foundation upon which she would build a future filled with dignity, compassion, and hope. The girl's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. From the cold and cruel home, where her stepmother's hatred ruled, she had come to a place where kindness and hope touched her life. She still remembered the nights of hunger, the pain of illness, and the fear of being abandoned. Those memories lingered, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come and how strong she had become, with the help of the elderly woman and the volunteer teacher. She began to learn again. Each lesson, each book, each small success gave her confidence. She discovered that knowledge was not just about schoolwork. It was power. It was freedom. It was the key to shaping a life that could never be taken away. She wanted to learn everything she could, not for wealth, not for recognition, but for the ability to stand on her own and help others like herself. The wealthy woman who had visited the slum continued to support her quietly. She arranged small donations for school supplies and basic necessities. The girl was cautious, but she accepted the help. She understood that accepting kindness did not make her weak. It made her human. Through these gestures, she began to see that some people were willing to make a difference. Even for someone the world had ignored, her health improved steadily. The cough that had once seemed endless diminished. Her strength returned, and she could walk longer distances without feeling faint. Each day, she felt more capable of taking care of herself. Yet, she never forgot the fragility of life. She carried her past with respect, using it as a reminder to stay humble, patient, and kind. One day, the volunteer teacher suggested that she try to contact her father. The girl hesitated. She remembered his absence, his inability to stand up to her stepmother, and the pain of being abandoned. But the desire to see him, to hear his voice, and perhaps to understand why he had allowed her to be left in danger, was too strong to ignore. With guidance, she wrote a letter, carefully explaining her journey, her struggles, and her survival. She did not ask for pity, only understanding. When the letter reached her father, he was shocked. The words on the paper painted a story he had never truly seen. He read about her sickness, the cruelty of the stepmother, and her life in the slums. Guilt and regret filled his heart. He realized how wrong he had been to trust someone who had caused so much pain to his own child. He wanted to see her immediately, to apologize, and to make amends. The reunion was emotional. The father held his daughter, tears running down both their faces. He spoke softly, promising that he would never let anyone hurt her again. The girl listened quietly, still cautious. She had learned that love could not be assumed. It had to be proven. Slowly, she began to trust him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. It was not instant, but it was a beginning. Life outside the slums was still challenging. The girl needed to rebuild not just her health and education, but her sense of safety and confidence. She returned to school with determination. Her classmates noticed her dedication, her willingness to help others, and her quiet courage. Teachers admired her resilience. Slowly, she became known not as the girl who had been abandoned, but as the girl who had survived, who had grown stronger despite everything. She also began helping others in the slums, sharing the lessons she had learned. She organized small groups of children, teaching them hygiene, basic reading, small crafts that could help them earn money. Her experience became a source of guidance and hope for those who had faced similar hardships. She realized that while she could not erase the suffering of her past, she could use it to make life better for others. Through her journey, she understood the power of forgiveness. She never wished harm on her stepmother, though she had been deeply wronged. Instead, she used the memory as a lesson in resilience and compassion. She learned that holding on to anger would only weigh her down. Letting go allowed her to rise above, to build a life rooted in dignity, hope, and strength. Years passed, and the girl grew into a young woman. She pursued education with a passion, learning skills that allowed her to support herself and others. She continued to visit the slum, bringing resources, teaching, and mentoring children who reminded her of herself. Each life she touched was a small victory, testament to her resilience and courage. Her father remained a part of her life, but she never forgot the years of neglect. They built a new relationship, careful, patient, and filled with understanding. He supported her dreams, respected her independence, and never allowed anyone to harm her again. Their bond grew stronger, shaped not by perfection, but by honesty, care, and shared commitment. The girl's life became a story of transformation. From sickness, neglect, and abandonment, she rose to strength, education, and hope. She learned that life could be harsh and cruel, but it could also be filled with kindness, love, and opportunity. She discovered that survival was only the beginning. True victory was in using her experiences to build a better life and help others do the same. In the end, she did not seek revenge, wealth, or recognition. She sought understanding, growth, and the ability to create goodness in the world. She had endured suffering that could have broken anyone, yet she chose to rise. Her life became proof that even in the darkest moments, resilience, hope, and compassion could lead to a brighter future. And so, the girl who had once been thrown into the slums, sick and abandoned, became a symbol of survival and quiet triumph. She learned that the world could be cruel, but it could also offer second chances. She learned that kindness, patience, and perseverance were far more powerful than anger or bitterness. Her journey was not easy, but it was hers, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. Even after finding some stability and hope, the girl knew her journey was far from over. Life had taught her that every moment of comfort could be temporary, and every hardship could return if she was not careful. She carried the lessons of the past in her heart: resilience, caution, and the understanding that kindness and trust must be earned and protected. Each day, she continued to build her life carefully. Balancing hope with vigilance, she devoted herself to her education with even greater focus. Her mornings were spent studying, attending local classes, and reading the books she had collected. Her afternoons were spent helping in the community, teaching children, and assisting those who were sick or in need. Her evenings were quiet, reflective moments where she would journal her experiences and thoughts. This routine gave her life structure and purpose. She began to see that while she could not change her past, she could shape her future. The work she did in the community brought unexpected opportunities. People noticed her intelligence, her empathy, and her determination. A local charity invited her to participate in a mentorship program for children in need. Here she met professionals who had resources and connections she had never dreamed of. They encouraged her to apply for scholarships and educational programs that could help her continue her studies beyond the local school. For the first time, she felt the possibility of a life that went beyond survival. She dreamed not just of safety, but of achievement and independence. She imagined a life where she could have a home, a career, and the ability to help others on a larger scale. Her sickness was no longer a chain holding her back. It was a reminder of what she had overcome and a motivator for what she could achieve. Her relationship with her father grew stronger as she matured. He supported her decisions and offered guidance without controlling her. He admitted his past mistakes and promised to be a steady presence in her life. The trust between them grew slowly but steadily. She learned to accept that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant acknowledging human imperfection and choosing to move forward with wisdom. Meanwhile, her experiences had left her with a deep understanding of human suffering. She met many people who were struggling with poverty, illness, and neglect, and she empathized with their pain. She realized that while she had been lucky in finding support, many others were still trapped in cycles of hardship. This understanding inspired her to dream bigger, not just for herself, but for her community. She wanted to create opportunities, programs, and safe spaces for children and families who were at risk of being forgotten. As she grew older, she began to plan practical steps for achieving her goals. She sought vocational training in areas that interested her, such as teaching, social work, and healthcare assistance. She wanted skills that would allow her to earn a living, help others, and ensure that she could maintain independence. She understood that education and skill building were her most powerful tools in creating a life free from the vulnerabilities of her past. Her work in the slum continued, and she became a trusted figure. People came to her not just for practical help, but for advice and comfort. She became a mentor to younger children who reminded her of herself scared, sick, and abandoned. She taught them that even in darkness, there could be hope, and that perseverance could open doors that seemed permanently closed. Despite her growing responsibilities, she never neglected her own health. She visited clinics regularly, took her medication, and ensured she had proper nutrition whenever possible. Her body had been fragile once, but she learned to respect it and protect it. She understood that her well-being was essential not only for her survival, but for the people who relied on her guidance and support. One day, a representative from a larger foundation came to visit the slum. They were impressed with her work and dedication. They offered her a scholarship to continue her education at a reputable institution, along with mentoring and support for her community projects. The girl could hardly believe it. This opportunity was more than just academic hit. It was validation of her hard work, perseverance, and the hope she had never given up on. She embraced this opportunity with gratitude, determination, and humility. She worked harder than ever, studying late into the evenings, assisting the foundation with projects, and ensuring that the children in her care did not feel abandoned. Her days were long and challenging, but she felt alive and purposeful. She had transformed her suffering into action, and every step she took reinforced her belief that resilience and compassion could change lives. As her education progressed, she began to think about long-term plans. She envisioned a center where children could learn, be cared for, and find safety even if their families could not provide it. She wanted to ensure that no child experienced the neglect, abandonment, and sickness that had once defined her life. Her experiences had given her a vision that was practical, compassionate, and rooted in real-world understanding. The girl also began to reflect on her stepmother. Though she did not seek revenge, she understood that the woman's actions had shaped her journey in unexpected ways. The abandonment forced her into resilience. The cruelty taught her empathy. And the neglect pushed her to find inner strength. She realized that even painful experiences could have meaning when transformed into purpose. As months turned into years, her work began to bear fruit. More children joined her programs, families felt supported, and the community started to thrive in small but meaningful ways. She had become a symbol of hope, showing that even someone abandoned and sick could rise, inspire, and lead change. Her past was no longer a shadow, but a foundation upon which she built her future. Her relationship with her father continued to grow. They traveled together to visit projects, discussed future plans, and supported one another. The bond that had been broken by neglect was slowly mended by understanding, patience, and shared purpose. He became her ally, a reminder that family could heal. Even after betrayal and absence, despite all the progress, she remained humble and aware of the fragility of life. She knew that challenges would continue, that not every plan would succeed, and that the world could still be cruel. But she also knew that her choices, her resilience, and her compassion could make a difference not just for herself, but for countless others. Her health, while still monitored, had stabilized. She was no longer the weak, sick child who had been abandoned. She had become a young woman of strength, insight, and purpose. Her education, her community work, and her personal growth all reflected a life reclaimed from despair and transformed into hope through everything. She carried a quiet understanding that life's hardships were not the end, but the beginning of strength. Every moment of pain had taught her patience. Every act of neglect had taught her resilience. Every encounter with kindness had taught her hope. She had built a life where she could help others rise, where her experiences could inspire change, and where the cycle of suffering could be broken through compassion and action. The girl who had once been thrown into the slums, sick and abandoned, had become a leader in her community, an example of perseverance and a source of hope for those who had nowhere else to turn. Her life was a testament to the power of resilience, empathy, and the belief that even the harshest circumstances could be transformed into purpose. And as she looked to the future, she knew that her journey was not only about survival. It was about creating a lasting impact that would honor her past and uplift those who needed it most.